Yo, you guys, this is Blacklist of the Abyss, and you're watching my review for Taboo Tattoo Episode 4. Alright, now, this episode starts off with Seigi chasing down a tattoo thief while also getting instruction in his ear from Izzy. She criticizes him because he's essentially trying to hold back his physical abilities, or at least the improvements that he's getting from the tattoo, because if you remember in the last episode he had trouble controlling it, so he doesn't want to overdo it and end up causing the guy like too much harm, but doing that makes him stiff. So as he just tells him, don't waste the abilities the tattoo gives him, it just hurts you in the end. So he tries to actually, well, I mean, he doesn't really get an opportunity to put that in emotion because he ends up beating the guy like that, like right afterwards. So there's just no real point to actually test out what she's saying. But it was a pretty good hit though. Like his hand literally like went inside the guy's chest. It was crazy. Like that looks like it freaking hurt. All right, but in the end, he ends up learning that his time limit for using his tattoo is about 10 minutes, or at least during actual combat. If he's just standing around, then it'll probably last longer. Probably it's how long the tattoos, how long drive lasts, I should say. It's probably proportional to like stamina or something. Just like as he said last week, the strongest person will be the strongest sealed, and probably the person with the most stamina would be the seal with the most stamina. So you know, it's all directly proportional and stuff. So yeah, so he learned what his limit is in actual combat, and the reason why that's important. I don't know if there's a period where like it can. I don't know if he can activate his tattoo and enter drive. Then as soon as drive deactivates, he can then go enter it again as long as he has blood on him, you know, and his trigger with him. I don't know if that's the case. If there is a case where there's a period in between where he just can't do anything, then it's obviously important to keep that time limit in mind. That way you don't activate drive too soon and end up in the middle of a fight with no power-ups or anything. Alright. Also, you have to keep in mind the effects it would have on your energy. I'm sure after being in a powered-up state, then powering down, it has a big effect on your body, your stamina, and it just tires you out, I'm sure. Plus, there's no way he can just have an unlimited supply of blood with him, because he carries his blood bags around. But, I mean, he's got to run out eventually, right? So unless he ends up using his own blood or someone else's blood, he's got to keep that in mind, too. So that time limit is definitely something to keep in mind throughout the series. Now, another thing to mention is that the sealed, they can't exit drive on their own. So you can't enter drive for a minute, then be out of it for a minute, then enter for another minute, and then you can't like elongate it for as long as possible doing that. Once it's activated, it's active, and that's that. So I'm sure Stan will find some way to deactivate the tattoos on their own, because Izzy in this episode was asking herself, why can't I just find a way to deactivate, to exit drive on my own? So I'm sure at some point Stan will come up with a way, since they do know more about tattoos than everyone else. And like I said in previous reviews, plot twists, I'm sure they're going to use that as a way to add in plot twists and people who have an advantage over our heroes and everything. Right, so that's something to keep in mind as well. But one compliment that Izzy does give him, though she doesn't actually say it out loud, so he didn't end up hearing it, she just thought it, but she did say that he adapts and catches on very quickly. So he's going to end up being a legitimate threat to the Brahman and Aryabhata very, very soon. Very soon. Okay? Though he'll have to change his mindset a little bit, and I'll get to that later on. But Seigi messed up a couple times in this episode. He just did. Then it's toward the end, so I'll get to it then. But he messed up. All right. Now, after this, Mish, she drops off. Schrodinger's cat drops off her cat exactly where she found it. Then she goes off to attack Lisa's team. She actually phases through the roof and the ceiling and everything, and then just slaughters everyone but Lisa. And her ability extended not just to herself, but to her sword as well. So anything she's in contact with, she can affect with her powers as well. So now we know she can phase through objects, though we don't know if she can phase through living things or not. We don't know. She can at the very least phase through inanimate objects, and she can phase inside of human beings and kind of like inside their consciousness. Okay, And she ends up just slaughtering everybody but Lisa. At one point, she's holding her sword up, and like the gears inside it start to spin, and she swings the sword and she slashes a guy from a distance where the sword doesn't even make direct contact. Okay, so this weapon was clearly created just for her. Well, not necessarily. Well, actually, you don't. There's no real way of knowing that. But it's definitely a specialized weapon. I don't know how that. Maybe it's based on tattoo power or something like that. They can create these devices to alert people to when a tattoo is being activated, then they can probably create a weapon that's powered by the very energy and the waves or whatever that the tattoos give off. So maybe each tattoo has a specific signature. So then you could maybe make a weapon specifically for one tattoo user. But again, this isn't literally just me throwing stuff out there. At the end of the day, her weapon, the gear or whatever it is in her sword spun around, and she could slice the guy from a distance. Um, so I am interested in that kind of technology, though, because if everybody has weapons like these, and someone, well, at least everybody in the Brahman, at least, if they all have weapons like this, that makes them significantly more powerful, right? Especially if they're created specifically to fit a specific person's fighting style. All right, so that's sort of one of the main reasons why she just dominated everybody here. Lisa was flicking explosions at her. She can transform air and make it combustible. It's actually kind of similar to what Izzy can do, but it, it, I got the impression that Izzy focuses air into an area, then essentially creates grenades and bombs and things. But Lisa can make the air combustible, where like she doesn't have to compress it or anything. It's literally just she can create explosions wherever. Like wherever there's air, she could just cause an explosion. 10 feet away, 20 feet away, right in front of her. Small explosion, big explosion. Like I get the feel like that's the difference between their powers. We don't know everything about Lisa's powers, obviously, because this was just speculation on Mish's part anyway. But that it's something, and it's cool. It's cool. It reminds me of what's her name from the third season of Shotgun no Shauna. I don't even remember what her name was, but she created explosions too. It reminds me of her. You can, if you watch the first opening to season 3 of Shotgun no Shauna, also known as Shotgun no Shauna Final. It's also the best opening of Shauna, by the way. The first opening of season 3, best opening by far of that franchise. But you can see her there. There's a scene where she like goes like this or something. It's whatever. You'll, or maybe you'll know who I'm talking about. But anyway, point is, Lisa reminds me of her. The girl from Shauna, actually, her powers are actually more like Izzy's, but I'm getting on a tangent now. These reviews are long enough as it is. I don't need to go off on tangents about completely different anime. But anyway, one of the guys before he died, his name was David. He presses a button that alerts Izzy, and well, technically he alerts Tom to the fact that they're being attacked, and then Tom ends up contacting Izzy to tell her what's going on. At the time, her and Toko were in gym class, or at least I'm going to label it as gym class. Toko was actually doing exceptionally well because of the fact that Mish's tattoo was active, so she ended up getting a power boost from it as well. So it's not just a one-way thing. It actually goes both ways. Toko actually benefits from Mish, and Mish probably has some way of benefiting from Toko. I already came up with some stuff in the last episode's review about that. So there's no need to go into that again. But it's interesting to see that it actually goes both ways, and Toko can benefit from it as well. It makes you think that she might actually get more involved than she already is, and actually get physical and maybe start fighting, maybe find a way to activate the tattoo on her own if that's possible. So it's actually something interesting to think about. But anyway, when Izzy gets this message, she runs off. Seigi sees her and follows her. He gets a message that she's going into drive. Then he leaves, and then he sees her. Then he follows her. Okay, now Mish and Lisa, they're fighting one-on-one, but Lisa's abilities are such where she can't do too much in close combat situations, because if she has something explode right in front of her, it's probably going to affect her too. She is only human after all, even with the tattoo. She's still human. She's still affected by all this stuff. Okay, so with a close combat fight, she's just at a disadvantage. And especially when Mish is facing through walls and crap. Like I said before, power extends to a sword as well, and freaking dimensional cuts and crap, you know, like Lisa just gets dominated here. She dislocates her shoulder. Actually, a chunk of skin gets taken off too. She just got dominated here. And Izzy didn't even make it to helping her because she ran into a noise canceling field system thing that Laka had set up ahead of time, because he knew that she would go and try to help Lisa out. It's the same ability as the copy tattoos like Tom has. They took advantage of this loophole in the rules of the tattoo. They put the copy tattoo on this device that they had underneath the ceiling or underneath the roof, and they didn't really explain it very clearly. In order for Laka said that you don't need some type of machine in order to run a tattoo. You just need a human brain and a trigger. So I don't know. Does the human brain need to be in the same body that the trigger is attached? Like, can you have like some remote waves, like some sci-fi crap, where your brain waves are like nanotech or something? Like your brain waves are sent to the tattoo to control it and tell it when to activate, and then the trigger is whatever it's attached to. I don't know how they didn't explain it very well, and it makes sense for them to not explain it, because if I was the enemy, why would I do the cliche villain thing and explain everything to my enemy? Like, that doesn't make, so it actually makes sense to not explain it, so I can't really get too mad about that. The one thing I'm confused about is why he left without shooting her. Later in the episode, he said, at the end actually, he says he wanted to save dessert for last. So I don't know if this is a personal thing or if he just didn't want to go against his orders in taking out more than just Lisa. But obviously, at the end of the episode, he's in a position where he kind of has to fight back, obviously. But here, this was in a situation where that was necessary, so maybe that's why he just didn't want to go against orders. We don't really know how strict the orders were. But he ends up just leaving her instead of shooting her. Later, we see Lisa. She tells us that she believes that Mish's ability is to obscure her presence and essentially erase her presence to the point where real life objects do not realize that she is there, and because they don't realize that they're there, she can she can essentially make herself disappear and then reappear to a degree where she can actually essentially teleport through objects, but not really. She's really phasing through. Like, I have it in my head, an idea of what this ability is, but I don't know how to word it. I feel like she can make reality ignore her presence to a degree where even inanimate objects act as though she's not there, so she isn't affected by the laws of physics and can just walk through objects. She can phase into people's consciousness and take them. But I don't know. Mish said that Lisa was half right, half wrong. So we don't have all the specifics yet, but that's what it seems like to me. She can make reality ignore. She can make her body be ignored by reality. Like, I don't know. It's like, it's almost like here I go again. Kumagawa in Medaka Box. He can make anything into nothing. It's kind of like that, but she ends up making herself into something again afterwards. Okay. I don't know. It's good. We'll get more details later. Okay, but that's what it sounds like to me so far. She ends up finishing the job and taking out Lisa. Seigi ends up catching up to her and questions her actions, why she's acting the way she is, but Seigi knows nothing about her lifestyle, the way that she grew up, and him talking down to her is offensive to her because he just does not know what she went through, the type of world that she grew up in. He gets called a child by her, which is funny because she's obviously younger than him, but she calls him a child. She says that he's been spoiled by peace. He doesn't understand what the real world is like, what the underworld is like. He takes being alive for granted, and he doesn't understand that the world he's in right now, the underworld, does not work the same way that Japan works, or at least the part that he's from. The world that she comes from, the underworld, the only way to survive, the only way to live is to defeat other people, to control other people before they come after you, especially since in this world with tattoos, there's always going to be a struggle for power, and being too kind will end up getting you killed. All right, like I said last episode, I believe it was. It was last episode with that flashback that we got. That flashback was there to show us the type of world that she grew up in, where she realized she couldn't just be kind to people, because if she did, she wouldn't survive. She had to fend for herself. She had to kill. She had to do what she had to do in order to survive. So that's the world she comes from. And the fact that someone who's been as sheltered as Seigi has, which he hasn't had the easiest life either, but it's still easy in comparison to Mish. So to her, it's just like, are you of all people trying to criticize the way I live? You know nothing about me. You don't even know how the world works. You live in a fairy tale, and you don't know anything about reality, especially the reality of the underworld. So she just doesn't want to hear any of it. And she's actually right. She's 100% right. He knows nothing about her or the world that she grew up in. But at the same time, she doesn't understand that there are people who aren't going to participate in that struggle. Well, they are technically participating in the struggle for power, but she doesn't understand that there are people like Seigi who are going to be kind to you, and they aren't going to try to take advantage of you. She doesn't understand that not everybody is like Aryabhata. So she doesn't understand that it's okay to feel the way that Seigi feels, and as long as you pick your allies well, it's not going to hurt you in the end. So in the end, they both come from completely different worlds with completely justified beliefs. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not she sticks with Aryabhata or leaves and joins Seigi and Izzy in the U.S. Army. Anyway, she ends up knocking him off the roof. Tom catches him. Mish and Locke get away with Lisa. And the building that Izzy was on ends up blowing up, but she manages to get away and get to the building that Tom is at. Seigi ends up getting sent back to school, but her and Tom end up investigating, and they end up finding Lisa's phone. And when Izzy listens to the message on it, she tells Tom to call for reinforcements because they're going to be transporting her to Salinistan that day. All right. As far as Seigi goes, he met up with Toko at the school, and they both kind of blew up at each other because Seigi, he saw some pretty gruesome stuff. He saw all those guys, Lisa's entire team slaughtered in pools of their own blood just all over the place. That's a pretty traumatic thing to see, especially for someone who isn't used to that kind of thing. You know, he hasn't been desensitized to it yet, so that was rough for him to see. And he doesn't want Toko to have to experience that. I mean, just look at the very last episode. When Izzy was showing him some of the side effects and some of the disasters that happened as a result of Voidmaker and testing, he covered her eyes because he didn't want her to see something that gruesome. And now she's asking him about something that she doesn't realize is gruesome, but he does, and he, just like last episode, doesn't want her to have to see something like that. He doesn't want anyone to have to see that, especially someone close to him and important to him like Toko. So he's just telling her, no, I'm not telling you, I'm not getting you involved in this. But Toko, at the end of the day, she doesn't like the idea of being protected by the person that she herself wants to protect. You know, so she wants to be involved. He doesn't want her to be involved. They both care for each other, and this is just the result of that. But in this case, it just ends poorly because they blow up at each other. But they both know that they're in the wrong. They both believe that they're in the wrong. So Toko ends up deciding that she is going to try to learn more about Seigi, more about his situation, more about his state of mind. That way she can actually understand where he's coming from, understand why he does the things he does. And once she does understand why he's doing the things that he does, she'll actually be able to respond in a way where maybe she can get him to understand where she's coming from. Right? So that's that. we see Laka fixing up Lisa. Apparently, he's actually really good with that kind of thing. To the surprise of Mish, we see the cat make its way back to Mish, which is funny too. So honestly, this cat's becoming one of my favorite characters. It's just really entertaining. I love this thing. I love it. It's actually cool. Um, Later, Toko and Seigi both get called to Izzy's house and Tom's house and everything. Things are kind of awkward between them, but Toko's actually got her resolve, and she wants to understand. She also wants to know why it is that Seigi is okay with sharing these experiences with Izzy, but not her. And the difference is obvious to us because Izzy's the one who brought him into this world. She's obviously more used to it. She's older as well. Though I don't know if Toko knows that Izzy is young. She was there when she heard about her cost of power being her body, but I don't think she realizes just how old Izzy really is. But she again, to us it's obvious why he trusts Izzy and he's okay experiencing this stuff with her, but to Toko, like we're watching from outside the wall, so it's easy for us to understand. But for people that are right there, it's not as obvious because they don't have access to it. They don't realize that it's a story, and because they don't realize it's a story, they don't know that they should think of it in terms of a story. That this is why something in this situation happened. To them who are actually experiencing it and living it, it's just not that obvious. It's just not. Right? Because real life is rarely that simple. But for us, it's a story, so we can predict these things and we can see them more easily. So Toko's trying to figure out, how much does Izzy mean to you? What do you think of her? Why is it that you're willing to share all this stuff with her, but not with me when you've known me for longer and you're closer with me? So things are kind of awkward between them, but they end up making up very quickly because Tom ends up becoming the enemy. Because Izzy ends up handcuffing Seigi to prevent him from following her, which ends up not working, obviously. And, this is what I was talking about earlier when Seigi was just messing up. Because he's trying to tell him, listen, the reason we don't want you to fight is because he thinks that they only care about him because of the tattoo, and Tom says that's one of the reasons, but it's not the only reason. I mean, sure, the Void Maker, it could be the key to solving the mysteries of the tattoos. It's important that Princess Aryabhata does not get that tattoo, but at the same time, we do care about you, alright? Trust me, if you fight the Brahman, you will die. Plus, you don't even realize just how much risk the Lieutenant has taken on, the position she's put herself in, the risks she has taken just to keep you safe. In reality, what should happen in this situation is you should have been sent back to the U.S. regardless of what your will was. Your will doesn't matter. In this situation, you get sent back to the U.S. whether you want to be or not, and they experiment on you and they do all these things, but the Lieutenant intentionally did not do that because she does care about you. And if anyone even finds out about this, she's the one who's going to get punished for it, okay? Big time. Okay, so that's some Patriot Act level crap right there. Patriot Act, all right? You don't know what happens to Patriot Act people because they make sure you don't know, because if it comes out, then that's just, it's just not good, all right? So he tries to make him understand that they're actually looking out for him, and he's just stupid, so he just doesn't understand. And he just disagrees, and he breaks out of the handcuffs. His wrists start bleeding, and he uses that blood to activate the tattoo, which doesn't actually make any sense, because if you remember the last episode, he had blood on like his entire palm, and that wasn't enough to activate the tattoo, but now a couple drops on the side are enough to activate it. So unless using it more and more means you need less and less of your trigger, then this doesn't make much sense, but it's not that big of a deal, so I'll just overlook it. What I can't overlook is the stupidity of Seiji saying, listen, well, he didn't say it, but last episode, he promised not to use Void Maker. Literally one episode later, he uses Void Maker. And of course, he can't control it, so he ends up destroying the entire house. he's lucky no one was watching and saw that. I don't know how someone would miss it, but he's lucky. Both times they missed it, both times. Okay, so he's lucky on that part. But he ends up taking out the entire house. He almost killed the rabbit too. If he had killed because the rabbit's the other great character in the show. All right, if he had killed the rabbit, I might have had to turn against this guy. All right, but he ends up destroying the entire house. And then he and Toko end up leaving to go after Izzy, and the episode ends with Izzy confronting Laka and Mish. Alright, because they ended up finding out where the ship was. So that's that. From the preview, we can tell that Mish is at a disadvantage because she had activated her tattoo earlier on, so it took a toll on her body, so she's just not at her peak performance right now. She's not at her best. She's not at 100%. So that's going to affect the way she fights against Izzy. But at the same time, they got Laka there too, so it's going to be 2-on-1. I mean, it's not 2-on-1 because she has backup, but those two guys that we saw there didn't have tattoos. At least I'm assuming they didn't, because they look like typical fodder characters, and I'm assuming a fodder character isn't going to have a tattoo. Right? So, but it should be interesting. It should be an interesting fight. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing if actual backup with tattoos shows up. I'm interested in seeing what happens when Seigi goes there. And I'm interested in seeing what Toko does. Is she just going to sit there? What happens when these two people with the same tattoo end up getting into a close vicinity of each other? You know, I'm interested in seeing what happens. So, yeah, that's that. But for this episode, I'll give it, I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Why not? Because Seigi, I like the stuff that happened with Lisa. It makes Mish look really good. It just makes her look really strong. I like the investment that Izzy has in her friends, and we get to see just how much she cares and what she's willing to do. We know she cares about Seigi, but even so, she's still willing to force him to the ground, handcuff him, and do something she knows might turn him against her. Especially since he said in episode 2, if I catch you doing something I don't like, I won't hesitate to fight you. So, I like the development for Izzy here and Lisa and Mish. I like the battle going on between Mish and Seigi as far as their perception of the way that the world works. And I also like the fact that we're about to see them fight. So yeah, I'll give this episode an 8 out of 10. Even though Seigi was being an idiot, it makes sense for him to be that way. It's fitting for him to think that way, because let's be honest, even though Tom is right, no one would like to be forced against their will to be sent somewhere, then be told we should be happy we weren't forced against our will to be sent somewhere, So it makes sense for him to feel that way. So even though it's stupid, and even though Tom is 100% right, it does make sense for Seigi to not be satisfied with that and say it's my decision to make. So I'll give the episode an 8 out of 10, and that is that, you guys. Rate, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at BlacklistOTA, and I will see you guys next time.